This video is sponsored by Skillshare. Ayo! Welcome to episode 19 of Create This Book by Moriah Elizabeth and Ashleigh Monet. Would be me. After this video, we will finally be on track back to doing the books in order. And I want to do a little something extra for this video. I'm going to include my sketch process for all of today's prompts because one, I'm really far behind this week and I have not gotten a chance to sketch ahead of time off camera. And two, I actually got called out in the comments a couple of weeks ago and someone accused me of tracing my art. Okay. To clarify this scandal, a person commented on a fan art page asking if I traced it because you could totally find the image online elsewhere. So they felt I should disclose that it wasn't original art. So for the record, in case there's someone else out there that hasn't noticed, I do a lot of fan art and portraits on this channel. No, fan art is not original art. I don't claim it as something I've come up with, and I'm usually working directly from a very popular reference. So yes, you will be able to find these references on the internet. But I've spent years practicing drawing what I see, so I can replicate a photo from looking at it. This is a hard-earned skill. It is wildly different from tracing. So since I'm petty and that one really bothered me, I'm gonna show how I replicate a reference photo without tracing it. We have 4 new prompts to tackle in this episode, so enough of me talking. Let's jump right in and see what I can create. All right, first prompt, create a test. Test the difference between your right and left hand. Draw/write something in box number 1 with your dominant hand. This is box number 1. Then try to duplicate your writing/drawing in box number 2 using your non-dominant hand. And here's box number 2. I love this concept and I love watching others struggle to use their non-dominant hand. I am in fact a right-handed person, so for this page, I kind of want to lean into that concept that if you're right-handed, you're left-brained, but if you're left-handed, you're right-brained. I think I heard this was a debunked myth, but I don't know. I'm using it anyways. Well, this prompt requires no sketching. We can just go in rogue. Again, starting in box number 1 with my right hand, I decided to use my acrylic brush pen so I wouldn't have to worry about bleed through. On this side, I want to draw the left hemisphere of the brain, starting with a pink base. And then I went through using a slightly darker pink to create that squishy, zigzaggy brain fold texture. It is a technical term. I am very scientific. I had to work so hard to resist my urge to add any sort of shading or realism to this, knowing darn well like my left hand is not going to be able to keep up. Stupid left hand holding me back. But then I decided to write left brain using orange, which is a color I just love to pair with pink. And then made this large orange block that I'm going to fill in with a bunch of characteristics that left brain folks are supposed to have. But while that dried, one thing I just couldn't deny myself was juicy highlights on that brain. The words are already done. Yeah, so I had some technical difficulty this episode. Somehow in transferring clips from my hard drive to my iPad, I lost this one of me adding the writing and outline on this side. Poof, just gone. But that said, left brainers are supposed to be logical, analytical, factual, and cautious. So what about those right brainers? I followed the same steps, first laying down the pink brain base, but you can see I even struggled on how to hold the marker to get the thick application. It's like my left hand did not want to bend the way that my right does. And no one else has ever mentioned in doing this prompt how desperately my brain was telling me, switch hands, switch hands, switch hands. Like I was at war with myself the whole time. I felt a little more in control with the thinner lines, but not much. I was just so shaky and unsteady. It was very frustrating. And I even had to rotate the whole book just to write on this side, and it still looks like I had a seizure while writing it. I decided to use purple on this side, another color that I think works just beautifully with pink. And this part is just tragic to watch, but I butchered the highlights. These are not the smooth, satisfying, juicy highlights that make me happy. I'm very upset with these. Oh, time for my seizure outlines and the writing. Oh, the writing. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like when I watch other people do this exact challenge, like their non-dominant hand isn't this much of an embarrassment compared to the one they normally use. Does that mean I need to do more with my left? Like, have I neglected it? Does anyone know of any hand physical training techniques? Okay, I did technically cheat here. I decided I wanted to re-outline these boxes, and yes, I did both sides using my right hand, but it was just the box, okay? Anyways, though, the right brain folks are supposed to be intuitive, creative, risky, and emotional. Now let's zhuzh up the prompt, and this page is done. It's a fun test, sure, but I'd prefer not to ever use my left hand again for art in this book. Can we agree to that? All right, next prompt. Create a playlist. Think of songs that are special to you. Write down a few song titles and what they mean to you. So rather than a bunch of random songs, I do have one Spotify playlist that has some real significance to me emotionally, and that is the Queen playlist. Now, my actual Queen playlist is obviously a lot longer than this, but because of size, it just shows my top 5. I'll get into why these songs mean so much to me in a bit, but for this side of the page, we are going to replicate a photo reference of a portrait of the one and only Freddie Mercury, the third and final piece I will be creating as homage to the musicians that have inspired the names of my cats. The most effective way that I've found to make sure that your drawing has the same proportions and therefore a greater likeness to the reference photo is to use the grid method. And you can see exactly what I'm talking about on Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creative folks like you and me. They offer thousands of classes across a ton of different creative categories like art and illustration, crafts and DIY, marketing and business, photography, animation and 3D, and that's just to name a few. They are constantly adding new class categories. These classes are led by industry professionals, and Skillshare even offers curated collections of classes called learning paths. Think of them as a playlist somebody else put together of all of the classes that you need to master your new skill and take that hobby, passion, side hustle, or career to the next level. Skillshare has a ton of classes available for portrait drawing, and one that I found really helpful in understanding the grid method is this one. Drawing a Realistic Portrait, Grid Method, Portrait Drawing for Beginners by Ritika Sridhar. It makes the process super easy to understand if you've never done it before. And if you want to step up your sketch game with classes like these, you can get started right now because the first 500 people to use the link in my description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Thank you so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Now back to the portrait. All right, so once we have our grid, it just makes it easier to position all of the features more accurately. The better trained your eye becomes with spacing and all of that, the fewer grids you eventually need to use. But for starting out, you definitely want a more dense grid like this. Once I'm happy with the sketch and where everything is placed, then I go through and use a very thin liner to mark only the darkest spots of those features. You don't want to fully outline them, that'll make it look cartoony, but doing this gives you a guide on where they are in a way that's easy to cover with dark colors. Now, if I do use a grid, I draw it very, very light so it's easy to erase. But I really wanted you guys to be able to see it here for this example, so I drew it a little darker and it's becoming a little stubborn to erase now. But whatever, now I can start the color, my favorite part, and tell you all a little bit about why this playlist just tugs at my heartstrings. Proceed with caution, this is gonna get a little heavy. So the Ride or Die fans already know because I mentioned it in my first ever video on this channel, the Draw My Life, and I talked about it a little bit more in depth with one of my recent lives. But sadly, I was a statistic and got pregnant as a teen. I didn't have many options. I really didn't have any support, and I grew up pretty poor and wanted so much more for my kids. So I made the extremely difficult decision to place the baby, a little girl, for adoption. It was by far the hardest thing I have ever had to do in my life. The one thing in my life that sent me into a true depression for quite some time. It was a fairly open adoption. Like, I received regular updates about how she was growing from her two wonderful dads, but I never got to see her in person because we lived in different states. Now, over the years, this was a really profound source of emotional pain for me. The sort of thing that, like, it gets easier with time, but you never get over that. You never stop thinking about her, whether she has pain in her heart over being placed, whether she feels unwanted. Like, you'd give anything just to be able to tell her just how much you did want to be a mom to her, but how happy you are that she got the life that, like, you could have only dreamt of giving her. She wouldn't have had that life with you. I'm telling you, it ate at me every single day. Well, in a turn of events that would completely change my life, almost 12 years after the adoption, she reached out to me on social media. And I remember that night like it was yesterday. I was so happy. I can't even explain. And a few months later, I got to see her for the first time in person since she had been born. The whole family took a road trip out to see her. She got to meet my kids, my husband. I got to spend some time with her. I got to hear her voice. I got to watch her play the piano. It was just unlike anything. And I can say that my heart healed that day. So where does Queen fit into all of this? Well, on this road trip, we were not properly prepared as far as music was concerned. Cell service is terrible across most of the drive, and that meant that Spotify would cut out and the radio stations would just be empty static. Now, I had intended to bring along my dinosaur of an iPod for when we hit those dead zones, but I forgot it. Well, it turns out Cody had one playlist downloaded onto his phone from Spotify, and it was Queen. So pretty much the whole way there and back, we just had Queen on loop. So as you can imagine, I now forever associate Queen with the amazing experience of that road trip and seeing her in person for the first time. Aww. At this point in the drawing, I was really starting to see a resemblance between Freddie Mercury and the kid who plays Mike from Stranger Things. Oh, why am I blanking on his name? Gotta do a few juicy highlights and a touch of metallic on his choker. And then I made the background green to work with the whole Spotify color scheme, but a few moments of looking at it and I hated it. Whenever in doubt, just make it black. Glue him in next to the playlist. And this page is done. It means a lot, this one. It represents something so significant in my life. It's a tribute to Freddie Mercury as a person, to Queen as a band, and also honors my cat, Freddie. I love it. And next we have create a contradiction. Make up something contradictory.
Hot ice, bright darkness.
Draw or write about it here. Let me begin with a black page background. I sure hope you guys aren't bored of that. I feel like I do it at least once in every episode, but I can't help it. I love it. But for my contradiction, I went with one of my favorite contradicting terms, living dead. I made this creepy drippy font in a few shades of green as I thought it would really complement what I will be drawing on the other page, a zombie. Been a little while since I did a zombie, and I couldn't help but notice I've only done zombie guys for this channel so far, so you know what? Let's make this one a zombie girl. And I want this to be a zombie girl that I can relate to, so she'll be a zombie artist. I didn't use a reference for this one, but honestly, I probably should have, at least for the pose, because I think it's a little off. But I thought I could keep it simple and just have her squeezing a tube of paint out onto a classic artist palette. She'll start to come together here with the liner. She definitely needs some big bulging eyeballs, a missing nose so she kind of looks skeletal, and a big toothy grin with no lips. Zombies are so fun to draw because you basically toe the line between person and skeleton. And I love drawing both of those things. So since she is an artist, I'm giving her a paintbrush tucked behind her ear and a messy bun. I wish I could say her hair was so disheveled because she's a rotting corpse. But the reality is this is how my hair looks 90% of the time while I'm creating. Next, I needed to line her hand, squeezing that tube of paint. I decided in the moment, though, that I wanted some sort of tear in the skin where her bones were exposed. So I chose the hand, not 100% sure it worked there, but you know what? We're going with the flow. It's fine. Next, I want to put her in an artist's smock with a tattered, distressed shirt underneath, and then finish out that palette. A few little fine line details to finish it out, and I can't lie, I was happy with the line work. I was excited for this piece, But next came time to color, and this is where it kind of got away from me. I used marker for most of it, but switched to watercolor for the background, and I don't know, I felt like everything was great, except the darn greens I picked for her zombie skin. Like, they're much too dark, way too intense. But unfortunately with alcohol markers, if you go too dark, like, it kind of just is what it is. It's there. There's no easy way to lighten it up. I went through with colored pencils to add some details, add some texture, add some depth, and as a last-ditch effort, used a little white to try and lighten all over her skin. It kind of helped. Not really. I thickened up a bunch of the outlines a bit more for a good graphic, cartoony feel, and then if there was anything that could make me love this piece, it's juicy highlight time. Well, let's glue her in. And this Living Dead page is done. If you think I'm being too hard on it, I photoshopped it a little lighter, and yes, this is exactly how I envisioned it. This to me would be perfection. I'd say without, she's like an 8.5 out of 10 right now. But that brings us to the final prompt. Create a contour drawing. Draw something without lifting up your pencil. Contour drawings can be tricky, and the truly fearless would just go in with a pen and draw, but I am not fearless. And since the point is just to draw and keep drawing without lifting, it's hard to be super accurate, so I definitely like to sketch something out beforehand. For this page, I wanted to draw a human heart. I think that is such a cool image and really works as a contour drawing. Now for the other side, I'm going to add some song lyrics. Back in that first live stream, someone asked me what my favorite song lyrics were and put on the spot, like I couldn't think of any lyrics, much less my favorites. But I've had time to reflect, and there was a line I wanted tattooed on myself at one point. So it's going to go here. Time to go in with my contour outline, starting with a little heartbeat, and looky there, I've already lifted my pen. Fail. I'm so bad at these, but to be fair, I did make sure that once I fixed that little break, I went right back to the point that I had lifted at and started again. So the line does continue, I just didn't nail the whole no lifting your pen thing. It's really not as easy as it looks. I think my wrist definitely gets some fatigue when I don't lift. I don't know. These just aren't made for me, but I did my best to make sure if I did lift, I put the pen right back where I left off. Next, I had to connect the drawing to the lyrics, and I have no idea why I went with a random squiggle instead of like a heartbeat line again. Rookie move. But the song lyrics are from the Ingrid Michaelson song, Girls Chase Boys. And it says, all the broken hearts in the world still beat. Something about those lyrics gave me hope, as when the song came out, I was going through some serious heartbreak and it felt like I just never would get over it. The words were a reminder that while yes, I was hurt, I was also still standing and I was gonna survive that pain. And looky there, I did. Now let's add a little watercolor to this one. And that's it for this page. I like it, but I did realize way after the fact that I didn't add any juicy highlights. So here's a shot of it a few days later when I, of course, went back in and added highlights. Much, much better. Well, we have reached the end and it is time to recap. We created a test showing the extreme difference in skill between my left and right brain, or rather my trusty right and my dusty left hand. We created a playlist, a collection of Queen songs that holds a special place in my heart, and a portrait of the always fabulous Freddie Mercury, for whom one of my cats is named. We created a contradiction with this Living Dead girl zombie artist, Color choices aside, I actually like this one a lot. And lastly, we created a contour drawing of a human heart. It may be broken, but all the broken hearts in the world still beat. Haha, another 4 down.
Well, that's it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed kind of getting a little peek at what goes on behind the scenes before my Create This Book series. Again, I always cut out my sketches just for pacing and editing purposes. There's a lot of extra footage that comes with that, and I'm erasing and adding and erasing and adding, so that's why you don't see it. So I hope there's no more questions about the legitimacy of my sketches. I want to thank Skillshare so much for sponsoring me again. Super big thanks to all of you watching, and until next time, goodbye.